Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? Okay, so hopefully you already started up your VMware virtual machine and the Docker machine. We're gonna go to La Lima, and in the daily work area, you can look at the folder with today's date on it, and then just click on that HTML file. Okay, so we're going to start off returning to do some work on project 1, and we're going to create a file called helpers.php, and we're going to locate this inside of the project 1 folder that we're going to put inside of docs. Okay, so actually we did a little bit of work in that folder already. We're going to create a file. Now, in order for this helpers.php to work correctly, we're going to create a function in it called connect. And for connect to work, the IP address for this host here, which is going to be, of course, the Postgres SQL IP address, we need to go ahead and get it this way. So you may have already looked at that last time and noted what it is, but it doesn't hurt for us to take a look at that. And in order to do that, since it's a Docker command, we're going to need to start up a conemu terminal and then issue that first command there, docker network ls, to list all the networks so that we can get the correct ID for the network that we're interested in, and then issue that second one where this network ID is going to be the first 6 characters that we find when we look at it here. Okay, so let me minimize this for just a moment. I'm going to start up a conemu terminal. And the first thing I want to do is set the environment variables. Once I do that, then I can start issuing Docker commands. Okay, so let me go ahead and do that. Okay, and I definitely want to have more than one terminal open. So I'm going to open a second conemu shell and then set the environment variables for that one as well. And in one of those shells, what I'm going to do is start up our containers. And just wait until those come. Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong directory. Okay, so because I was in the wrong directory, it couldn't find Docker compose YAML, and so that's why that command failed the first time, but then now it's correct. I should make sure that I change into the correct main Docker folder here so that I don't have problems with that. All right, so the first thing I want to do, now that it has started off, I can list all the networks. And the one that I'm interested in is the second one on the list, the Docker CENT280 Win7 underscore default. Okay, and if you look at the ID for that, it starts off with 2A06F3. So I can issue this command. Okay, so Docker network inspect, and I want to inspect 2A06F3. F3, and I'm going to pipe the results to group regular expression, ignore case, gateway, so that I can get the IP address. And it's 172.19.0.1. If I return back to my web page, that's what I have here. Okay, so that I got that because I remembered that from last time. But in case you're wondering where that comes from, then it's basically from running those two things, right? First, looking for the ID of the network that we're interested in, okay, and then the other thing is to then get for that particular network the value for gateway, okay, and that's basically the IP address for the Postgres SQL server. Okay, so let's go ahead and work on helpers.php. Okay, so first I want to go back to Windows Explorer and then navigate to that directory. Okay, so I'm going to go to Documents, then Docker, then the main Docker folder, then the Docs folder, and then I have this Project One folder. And last time, or at least up to now, all we have is an init.sql, okay, which sets up the one table that we need for this database. Okay, it's a very simple database because all we're interested in is being able to log into a simple web application. So if you looked at this, let's open this up just to remind ourselves a little bit. All it has is a single table, and it's just a table called users. Stored inside of this table will be information that allows us to authenticate a user. So if they enter the correct username and password, they log into the web application. Okay, and so for Project One, that portion of it, if a user is able to enter a correct username and password and then land on the home page, then they logged in, and that's basically what most of the application consists of. Okay, now there's work we need to do in order to be able to accomplish that, but the database backend is actually very simple. Just needs to store the user's authentication information. Okay, so what I'd like to do is create a new file, okay, and this is going to be my helpers.php, and I want to actually locate it in the same directory that I'm locating this init.sql. Okay, so I'm going to click on new to start, and this is going to be my helpers.php. So since it's a PHP script, then it should start with this start tag. Okay, so less than question mark PHP, and then the ending of that script will have a question mark and the greater than symbol. Okay, those are the standard things. It's not doing any syntax coloring yet because I didn't save the file, so it doesn't know the extension of the file. Okay, so let me go ahead and save this. Okay, so where we are right now, well, I want to make sure I'm in the right place, so I could just try this Project One. Let's do that just to see. Okay, so if I click it, I need to look up here and make sure that it's in the right place. So Project One, this Project One is a folder inside of Docs, inside of the main Docker folder. Okay, that's the right one. So I could go ahead and create a file, helpers.php. And I'm naming it helpers.php because this file is going to consist of a bunch of what we call helper functions, and they're just things that are going to make it easier to write the PHP scripts for this simple web application. Now, even though I'm calling it a simple web application, it is in terms of what the web application does, but because this is the first time you're looking at a PHP web application, there's going to be a lot of new things. Okay, so simple, yes, but then is it simple for you to understand the first time you're looking at it? No, there's going to be some things that you need to come up to speed at. All right, so let me return back to this, and it says use the following pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this function. Okay, so I copied that, and then I'm going to paste it inside of here, and let's see, the indentation and things like looks pretty good. Okay, so I need to check is this in fact the correct IP address? And it is 172.19.0.1. Okay, so what we would like to do is test this, right? Actually see if we can connect to the project1_db database. All right. So the problem or the difficulty that we face right now is that this is located inside of docs, inside the main Docker folder, but it's outside of the Apache web root, because if I go back up to docs, CENT280 represents the web document root, and we're looking inside of project one, so it's outside of it. That's actually the normal way you would want to do things, because this file, let's bring it up again, has sensitive information, right? It has the database name and a username and password to connect to that database, okay? As well as the host IP. Okay, although that's not such a big deal, but then definitely a database name, username, and password, those are considered sensitive pieces of information. So you want it stored outside the web document root, because you don't want some script that Apache is showing you to basically display that information. So it's outside of there. But what that presents us a problem with when we're using these two Docker containers is that if we want to look at the file inside of here, that's going to be inside of the PostgreSQL container, but to run a PHP script, which is what this is, then I need to be inside the PHP Apache container, not the PostgreSQL container. So I actually need things available in both. All right, so let's return to this just a little bit. And it says we're going to test this function by creating a folder inside of this. So look at a user, CENT280, documents, Docker, then the main Docker folder, docs, and then CENT280, and we're going to create a folder called project one. Okay, so we're going to have two project one folders, one that's meant to map to the PHP Apache container, the other one that maps to the PostgreSQL container. The one that maps to the PostgreSQL container has sensitive information which should be outside of the web document root. Okay, so let's work on that. All right, so let's open the CENT280 folder and let's add a project one folder inside of this. Okay, so this is inside the web document root. It shouldn't have any sensitive information in this inside of any of the folders here. Files inside any of the folders here. All right, so let's create a new folder. I'm going to name it project one. Okay, so if you take CENT285, it's definitely, you're going to be doing web programming there, and when you do that, that is very typical. You're going to have two folders with the same name, one inside the web document root that has your main PHP scripts, one outside of it that has all the sensitive information. Okay, and that's there for security purposes. Okay, so in this folder here, we're going to create a file. Okay, right now it's empty, but it says to go ahead and create a file called testconnect.php that has the following contents. Now, we got to make sure that we get this path correct. Okay, so we got to take a look at that a little bit. Okay, so first I'm going to return to this conemu shell, and I want to go with this one. I want to go inside the PHP Apache container. Okay, so let's type in docker compose. Okay, we run the execute command, but we put the PHP-Apache container, and then we're going to run bash inside of that container. So we should get a root shell inside of the web document root. Okay, and I'm going to change into the project one folder that I just created. Okay, so if I hadn't just created just a few minutes ago, just a few moments ago, I wouldn't be able to do this, but that's in there. And there should be nothing inside of there right now. Right, so if I do an ls, it's empty. I just created that folder. Okay, in the second CON-EMU terminal, what I want to do is, in this one, I want to go into the Postgres SQL database. Postgres SQL container, sorry. So Docker compose, okay, the execute command, exec Postgres SQL, and then bash. Okay, and here, right, I'm going to go cd/home. Okay, and if I do a ls here, there's a project one folder, and that one has stuff inside of it, right? So this is in the Postgres, that's got mapped to the Postgres SQL container. Let's, since we're inside the Postgres SQL container, let's get into PSQL, or use PSQL to connect to the database. Okay, so I'm doing this to connect to that database because I want to double check to make sure that I remember to create this database, right? Because there's a while since we created it, and that I can actually log into it. Okay, so I type SUMPASS to get in. So the correct password is SUMPASS, right? The username is Bob. The database exists. Okay, so I'm checking all of those things because when I want to connect from the PHP Apache side, I don't want it to not connect because I didn't create the database or I got the wrong password or something, right? So this is just extra checking that I'm doing before I go on to this side, right, the PHP Apache side, and test out a script that allows me to connect. Okay, so what I'd like to do is I want to go ls, and I want to go ls, and I want to go up 2 levels and then just list what we can see there. Okay, and what you can see is this is the project one folder that's inside of the docs folder. Okay, so I can see that file there. Okay, and so if I did this, okay, then I can see helpers.php and init.sql, okay, from this root prompt, right? That's not inside of a PHP script. This is not on the PHP Apache side, this is on the Postgres SQL side, but I can certainly still see those files, okay, because it's inside of the main Docker area, right, which gets mapped to both of those containers, okay, so I can definitely see that, and that's, if you look at that path, okay, // project one, okay, and you look at this script, okay, // project one, then I want to basically require helpers.php inside of this file. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create this file test_connect.php. So I make a new file. Okay, I'm going to save this. When I save it, I got to be careful of where I'm saving it. I don't want to just blindly choose project one because now I have 2 project one folders, right? So even if I did select this, I need to make sure it's the correct project one folder. So let's do that. Let's say we just tried it this way. And I look, this is the project one folder inside of docs. It's not the correct one. Okay, that's the one that gets mapped to the Postgres SQL container. So I go up to docs, and then I drop down to CENT280, and then I go into the project one folder there. Now the path is the correct one, right? Project one inside of CENT280, so this is inside of the web document root. All right, so I'm going to call this test_connect.php. Okay. So if I look here, right, and I do an ls without the path, then I can see test_connect.php is located in the correct place, right? Inside of project one, which is inside of the web document root, inside of the CENT280 folder. Okay, so you gotta be a little bit careful there, because we've got two containers, right? Not just one, because we got two main services. All right, so what we want to put into this, if you look back at this, is the following. Okay, so I'm going to highlight this here so I don't have to retype all of that. Now I'm going to paste it in. All right, so let's go over each of these lines. Okay, so on line 2 we have a require once function, and what that does is based upon the path to the file that you're going to put in as the argument, okay, it basically is going to get the contents of that file and include it into this script. Okay, so basically it puts it in there when the PHP interpreter is running this. So the Apache browser, the browser which is tied to the Apache service, cannot actually broadcast the contents of that. However, we can make use of it inside the PHP script. Okay, so what we're doing then is that file, which is this one here, has a definition for a function called connect. And then that's what we're going to actually run on line 3 of this. And then we check. So this selection statement from lines 4 to 6 checks to see if $PDO has actually been created or not. Okay, so if not $PDO, which means it didn't get created, then we're going to call the die function, which in PHP means terminate running the script. So it would not reach line 7. The only way line 7 is going to be reached, where it says connected successfully, is if $PDO does get created. And the only way $PDO does get created is if the connect function works correctly. Okay, so let's take a look back at this. So the connect function, it uses this string. We verified that that's the correct IP address. We verified that this database, using this username and password, we can connect to it, right? So it's a valid database. And then, so we construct a new PDO object. PDO is an acronym for PHP Data Object. It's a database agnostic way of dealing with a database. So if you have the right kind of connection string, okay, so if it was MySQL, you instead of saying PGSQL, you would have MySQL, and if you had a different kind of database, there would be a different string right here in order to connect to it. And those strings, of course, would signify using a driver that has been made for PostgreSQL. Okay, so it can connect to Oracle DB and things like that. You would have a different string there. But once you connect, this object is database agnostic. So that means all the commands you run will work irrespective of the kind of database that you're connecting to. Okay, so it's a very good way of doing things. The other thing that's really good about PHP data objects, okay, is that it has very good facilities for preventing something called SQL injection, which is a very common way of attacking pages. It is one of the easiest ones to prevent, and yet it's one of the most common ones that succeeds because people don't know how to prevent it. Okay, and so in CENT285 you'll learn how to basically protect against SQL injection, and PDO is going to help you because it makes it very simple. Okay, so we try to construct such an object, which is a connection to the database, and then we return that object. So here, if it actually returns it, that means we got a real connection. Therefore, this would be false, so it doesn't die, and then it should just say connected successfully. Okay, so that's the idea behind it. So I'm going to go to my first ConEMU shell, where I have this now. Wait, let me double check to make sure I saved it. Yeah, I saved it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run the lint switch, which checks for syntax errors. And I don't have any syntax errors. Okay, so that's good. And then, so what I'm going to do is actually run the file. That's what F is for. That's the file switch. And okay, there's something wrong with my connection string apparently, and so it didn't connect. Okay, so I need to look back at my helpers.php. And let's see. Oh, so if you look on line 3, that's where the problem is actually occurring. When you have your list of key and then values for the key, then the values are supposed to be inside of single quotes like this. But if you look at this is missing a single quote after the B and DB. So that's not correct. Let me put the single quote in there. Okay, so let me save that. I'm going to return back to the first ConEMU terminal. Okay, let me just clear the screen, and then I'm going to run this again. I could run the lint test to see if there's any syntax errors, but I'm pretty sure there aren't any, so I'm just going to run this. And it says connected successfully. So now we know that we can connect, okay, to our project1_db database from a PHP script inside the web document root, right? We're in the web document root, providing that we have this require statement that we have on line 2, right? So if we have that line inside of any of our main PHP scripts, we can connect to the project1_db database. Okay, so that's what we verify. So it takes a while to do that. It'll take a while even for the idea of what we just did to sink into your heads. But the thing is, this is something that you do, and you're very careful in the setup when you do that. So once you start actually writing PHP scripts that have to do something, like let you connect to the database so that you can authenticate a user, right? Because you can't authenticate unless you can connect to the database. But you do all this stuff ahead of time before you start really writing any PHP scripts that have anything in them, because you want to verify that you can connect, right? Because if you can connect, then if you have errors subsequent to that, you know it's not a connection error. Okay? So you take care of that. And very much when you do web programming, it's one of the more difficult kinds of programming that we teach on this campus. And that's because you have to think about so many different things that are going on, right? You have a back-end database, you have a scripting language which basically provides the middleware between the back-end database and the scripts that you view in the browser, okay? So you need to make sure you eliminate possible sources of error from the very beginning. So you gotta be able to connect. If you can't connect, then nothing else is going to work. So you verify this works before you spend a lot of time trying to develop any PHP scripts that actually are part of the web application, because then it's much simpler for you to proceed. You keep trying to make it so you minimize the places where errors can occur, you eliminate any errors, and then you proceed. Okay, so when we talk about incremental development in one program, then that means we do a little bit, we test it, and when it works, then we go on to the next part. it's some of the same kind of idea when we're doing web application programming. You basically do little pieces of it, verify that things work, and then you proceed, right? You don't try to write the whole thing all at once. Bunch of scripts you have to deal with, bunch of things on different levels. Okay, so you do them a little bit at a time until you're sure that everything works correctly. Okay, so that being said, we covered what I wanted to get through for project one. Okay, so that's a big step. Okay, a lot of stuff where it doesn't look like we're getting a whole lot done, but it's a very important one because now when we start working on the PHP scripts, we have the confidence that we know how to connect to the backend database, and that's really important. Okay, any questions? Okay, so I'm gonna pause there, and then if you ran into anything, raise your hand, and then I'll come and take a look at what you have. Then we'll come back and start looking at lab 5. Okay, so what I did is in the folder for daily work, I uploaded a couple of zip files. Now the reason why they're zip files is because the folders that I compressed, right, to create those zip files, they both contain PHP files. And if I just uploaded the PHP files directly, right, so if I uploaded testconnect.php or helpers.php, then Laulimo would clobber them, right, so it wouldn't have any of the contents. So if you look back at the folder that has today's date in the daily work, you're going to see those 2 zip files. This one here is for the one that's inside of the docs, inside of project 1 folder that's directly inside of docs, outside the web root. This is the project 1 folder inside of CENT280, so this is inside the web root. Okay. Okay, so if yours is working, you don't need those files. I'm just putting it up there because in case, because several people missed today, so then they could go ahead and get it from there when they get the opportunity to do so. All right, so let's take a look then at starting on lab 5. Okay, so here's the lab 5 handout, which you picked up in the front. Maybe let's make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so for this lab, you're going to be doing some object-oriented programming in Python again, and you want to create a car class and a car list class. If you took ICS 111 from me, then this is very similar to what we did a lot of times. In fact, we actually, in most of the sections I taught, we actually had a car class and a car list class. This is going to be the Python equivalent of what we did in those Java classes. Now, if you didn't take it from me, that's okay. There's actually the Python code for both a book and book list classes. It's shown on that particular web page. Okay, so if you go back to this, that's this link right here. Okay, so the quick way to get to that is go back to just the main web page for today's date and just click on this, and that'll bring up the link to the Python classes on the CENT280 website. Okay, so let's take a look at this. This is a file named book.py, okay, lowercase book, okay, not capital B, lowercase, and it defines a class called book with a capital B, okay, for book. And this right here is just a constructor, okay. This code, okay, will make it so that if I go Python 3 book.py, it's going to create an empty book because the constructor doesn't have any parameters the way that I set it up. Okay, set the title, the author, and the price individually for each of those. Okay, Not like Java programming, right? Java programming, we would need to have mutator methods. So we would have to have something like set title, set author, and set price. Okay? But here, the instance variables, title, author, and price, they're all public. So all I need to do is put the name of the object, and then I put a dot, and then I put the name of the variable, and then I just set the value to it. Okay, so remember we said in Python, they trust you not to mess yourself up. Okay, so they don't even require that the variables be set as private, the instance variables. They're all public. Okay, and that makes it a little simpler, shorter code, basically. And that's sort of the idea in Python from the very beginning, was to make it so that the amount of code you have to write is shorter. Okay, so this would basically have printed out just the things that we said there, not super interesting. Okay, we talked about class programming a little bit before. Okay, so here, this is a little bit better constructor, because instead of just constructing an empty book object, you can set the title, the author, and the price when you construct the book object. Also, it's better because by putting inside of this selection statement, if I use another Python program that imports book, right, imports the book module, it's not going to run this code right here, right? It only runs it if I'm running book.py directly. That's the purpose of that code there. Okay, so we've seen that before, but that's, again, another look at that same kind of thing. Okay, and it talks about self, the meaning of it, and basically it helps us when we're defining our instance variables and whenever we want to refer to the instance variables of the class, we need to basically use self. Okay, so if we go a little bit further, this is, remember, like in Java, when you write a toString method for the class, this is basically the equivalent of that. Okay, so as a special name, double underscore str double underscore. Okay, and notice that it is a class function, so then it has self as the parameter there, which means I have access to all the instance variables because they are all, right, part of self. Okay, so then I come up, so then instead of when I print B1, it just prints a generic message saying that it's a object in the book class. Okay, it'll actually use the double underscore, str double underscore, and it'll come up with the string representation that way, and it'll print out the string representation. So if you recall the toString method in Java, this serves the same purpose. Okay. Right, so I run it, we get this instead of this kind of thing, right, which is just a generic method, okay, that just like in Java where it inherits a generic toString which displays the class name, the @ symbol, and the hash code for anything. If you don't have toString defined, this is the thing that basically is inherited for any class in Python. Okay, so very simply, we create something that looks better. Okay, so here's an additional method, and instead of creating just a generic string representation for the object, this creates two different string representations, but they're very specific to that kind of format. So this creates the XML version of the book object. Okay. So it's a string, but it's a very special kind of string. It's an XML snippet, basically. And this one here, the toJSON method, again, returns a string, but that string, again, is basically a JSON representation of that book object. Okay? And so if you need to write to an XML file or to a JSON file, then those are useful. Okay, so they're like helper methods that can help you to write to those formats. Why do we care about those formats? Because when we pass data around on the web, then XML and JSON are two very commonly used formats for doing that. Because they're so common, most programming languages have XML parsers and have JSON parsers so they can read files that are put into that format. Okay, very common to have both kinds of things. Okay, so that's what we want to do. We want to write a car class that basically is the equivalent of this book class. Okay, so we'll come back to that in a bit. All right. Okay, so you can see when I ran the program and I decided to print out the XML representation and the JSON representation, then that's what it created. Okay, so you got to do a little work to make sure you get all the things in there correctly for both the XML and for the JSON version. If you take a look at these two, okay, it's easier to write to an XML snippet than a JSON snippet, because the JSON one, you gotta put colons and you gotta put commas except after the last one, things like that. Yeah, so it's a little more complex, and that's something you gotta be aware of. All right, let's go back, and now we want a storage class which groups the class property. Okay, so in Java, hopefully you've seen stuff where basically you have a class, a storage class that you define, then another class which basically consists of an array list of type, whatever storage that you define, your custom storage class, and this is what we're trying to do in Python. Okay, so in order to get this to work, from the book module we want to import the book class, because this is going to be a class that stores more than one book object, and where it's going to store it in is in this instance variable called book list. So you can tell it's an instance variable, right, because it says self.booklist and is defined inside of the constructor. Now, when we create a book list object, yeah, capital B, capital L, book list object, when we create that, okay, we want it to initially start off empty because we don't have any book objects stored inside of it yet, right? You start it off empty, then you can add to it. Now, here's an add method. Very simple. All we're going to do is append it onto the end of this list. So if I take my instance variable, right, which is a list, and I append to it the book object that gets passed in the add method, then I just stick it on the end of the list. Okay, so that's very much like what you do with a Java array list, except instead of append, you actually, the name of the method that's used to add on to the end of an array list is add. Okay, not append, but it's add. Okay, so simpler, I think, in Java. All right, now, here's the 2XML version of the book list class. Okay, so what do you have to do when you're putting it inside of an XML object and you have more than one book object? Now you're assuming we want to write to the complete XML file. So you need to have the XML declaration header on the first line, then you need to have the start tag for the root element, and then end tag for the root element. Everything in between is just an XML representation of the individual books. So all you need is a for loop to process this array, this list, and inside of it, all you do is you call the 2XML method, and then that'll basically add in all the XML snippets for each book object. So it's very straightforward, very simple. Writing to XML is much easier than writing to JSON when you have the book list, because it's just a simple, right? The declaration header, the start tag, and the end tag of the root element, then a for loop that just calls the 2XML for the book class to basically create the full XML object. Okay, very, very straightforward, very simple. Okay, and then so if we did that, you ran it, you could get this to work. Okay, now, Okay, so here, this is the full XML representation for those two book objects like that. Pretty simple. XML is easier to write to than JSON, but XML is harder to read than JSON. Okay, so that's one of the differences between those two different formats. Okay, now what we need to do is basically figure out how we can write the toJSON method for the booklet, because that's the one that's harder. So what I did here in this page is link into one of the ICS 111 sites pages that does this here. Okay, so here, if you take a look at this, now this is just a GUI program, which we'll look at stuff like this later on. And let's see where I want to go. Yeah, actually, this is on the 280 site. Sorry, I added this. Okay, so there's these things like this. And eventually, this is kind of a long page. This is a GUI tool basically for displaying stuff from a database. And we'll look at stuff like that. Okay, so this is not just for show. We'll actually do something like this later on. Okay, but not just yet. I'm trying to think. Why did I put this thing here? Okay, sorry. We're going to get back to that one later. I'm not sure exactly why I put it there. Oh, okay. So it's just an example of doing this. Now, but what is missing, okay, is it has a toXML method, but it doesn't have a toJSON method. So let's talk about that. We're not going to complete Lab 5 today, but let's get a start into writing those classes. All right, so let's start on this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is if I look inside my main Docker folder and my docs folder, okay, so outside of the web root, I'm going to create a folder called Lab 5. Okay, so let me go ahead and do that. And I put it inside just the docs folder outside the web root because this is something I want to get to in the Postgres SQL container. Why? Because that's where we have the Python stuff. Okay, so because we have Python there, that's where we're going to locate it at that point. And what I want to do is I want to create a file called car.py that's sort of like book.py. Okay, so how am I going to do that? I'm going to go to Genie, and I'm going to create a new file. Okay, and what I'd like to do is go back to this web page here, and on Python classes, and I'm going to go up to the part, oh, I went too far up, okay, where I have, okay, this book class defined. All right, so just to give myself sort of a template to work from, I'm going to copy all of those lines and I'm going to paste it into the Genie editor. I'm going to need to make some changes because I don't want to make the book class, I want to make a car class. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to save, and then what I want to do, let's see, I'll go to CENT280, Documents, Docker, main Docker folder, Docs, Lab 5, and then I'm going to call this car.py. Okay, lowercase car, because that's the name of the module, not the name of the class. Okay, now, the stuff inside of here needs to be changed. Practically every line needs to be changed, but it still is a useful template to start with. So instead of naming this class book, we're going to name it car. Okay, so we start off like that. All right, then we have a constructor, and it says title, author, and price. But if we look at the Lab 5 handout, we want to make it, right, so that the car class can take care of make, model, and price, right? Not title, author, and price. So I come back to here and I say, well, instead of title, I'm going to make that make, and oh, I better change my parameter list too, because this won't make too much sense otherwise. So make, model, and price. So this will be self.make equals the parameter make self.model is going to be the parameter model. And now my constructor matches what I want to use for the car class. Okay, so still got a lot of stuff I need to change, but I'll just start changing them one by one. So the title here in my double underscore str double underscore, which is like our two-string method, instead of title, I'm going to change that to make. And instead of author, I'm going to change that to model. And then price, I can leave that alone, right? Because the price of the car and price of the book, same kind of thing, so I can leave that alone. Let me save that. Okay, so I fixed up my constructor. I fixed up my string method, the string representation method. Now I need to fix up my toXML, right? The thing that writes an XML snippet. Okay, so let's start off by changing book to car, and then the end tag /book, I'll change that to /car. Okay, and then here I don't want this to say title, I want this to say make, and I'll change that here also. And start doing that same kind of thing. Instead of author, I want to put model. And instead of self.author, there's no self.author, self.model. And instead of /author, I'm going to put /model. Okay, then price, that one I can leave alone, right? So a similar kind of thing. Okay, and then oh, my toJSON method, somehow that didn't get indented correctly, so let me do that. Also, while I'm at it, okay, I'm going to check for the document. Indent type is tabs. I don't want that. I'm going to change it to spaces. Okay, and then indent width of 4, that's okay for Python programs, so I'm going to leave that. I'm going to replace all the tabs with spaces, okay, so that, again, this is better. Okay, so I got two E's there. Let me fix that. Okay, that would have shown up later when we tried to view the XML file that it creates. Okay, but anyway, I fixed that. And then we got our toJSON method. Okay, so I make the same kind of changes. Okay, so go through it one by one. Okay, so here's make. Okay, and then so it looks like my toJSON method is all right. I want to run this later to make sure. So I'm going to say this, not B1, I'm going to say C1 for a car. Okay, and make, model, and price. So make, so Toyota Camry for make and model, and then for the price, let's put 25,999.99 like this. Then I'm going to print out the string representation, the XML representation, and the JSON representation. Okay, so I gotta make all those changes. A lot of changes to make, but it's at least you don't have to start from scratch. Okay, and if you take your time, you can get that to come out correctly. I'm gonna return to my second ConEMU terminal. This is the one that's got the Python stuff because it's inside the Postgres SQL container. I'm gonna quit out of this database, so Control D is the same as typing \Q when you're inside a PSQL. I'm not in the right directory, so I'm going to go up one level and then come back down into the lab 5 directory. If I do a ls, you can see my car.py file is there. And then so I'm going to run this Python 3 car.py. And then what does it do? Here's the string representation, which is just a comma separated value string. Okay, so Toyota, comma, Camry, comma, 25.99.99. Then I have my XML representation. Okay, it looks like this, and then I don't really like the indentation that it's showing there, so I'm going to look and see if I can fix the indentation up a little bit. But that basically looks okay. And then here's my JSON representation. Okay, so when I have a string as the value for a given key, it's inside of quotes, right? But when it's a number, it's not inside of quotes, right, in JSON. That's one of the advantages of the JSON format versus the XML format, is that numbers get stored actually as numbers. And so when you're processing a JSON file, you don't have to convert a string into a number. It's already stored as a number. Okay, whereas XML, everything is text. So if it's supposed to be a number, you have to convert it after you read it in. Okay, and both of them, the indentation doesn't look too great. Let me see if actually that's something in my files. So yeah, I can kind of see it didn't come out the way I wanted here when I copied and pasted it. Okay, so this, I want that to be a couple of spaces, and I'm going to make each of these 4 spaces. Okay, so I just made the change to 2XML. Right? I didn't do the JSON one yet. I come back to here and I run the program again, and then I check the indentation now, and I go, yeah, that actually looks how I want it to. So I fix my indentation there. And I come here. This one I want 4 spaces. And here I want 6. Okay, so then I come back to this, I run it again, and that looks like what I want it to be. Okay, and then that spacing is just from experience. That actually works out well when you have to create the book list on a car list class. The indentation will come out nice for the overall things. Okay, so that's a start into it. So here's what I would like for you folks to do is go into Genie, okay, make a new file, come back to the web page, and in the web page, this web page, it has a version of book list, and the version of book list that we have is this. And it doesn't have 2JSON. Okay, so we'll talk about that a little bit. Okay, but I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it in here. And what I'm going to save this as, so I'm going to go save. I want to save it in the lab5 folder, right? Check the path, lab5 inside a doc, inside the main Docker folder. I'm going to save this as carlist.py. Okay. And then you start making the changes, right? So first line from the car module, import the car class. And instead of naming this book list, I'm going to name it car_list. So I need to change that here. And I'll change the name of that parameter to car instead of bk for book. And so I fixed up my add method. And then here, I'm going to change books to cars in my start element for the root element. Yeah, start tag for the root element, and then end with /cars. Okay, so for book and self.booklist, that's not going to work. So for car in self.car_list, okay, temp plus equals car.toXML plus a new line character. Okay, so I just make the most straightforward changes there. The indentation, I think it's going to be okay because I think I fixed it inside of the 2XML. So what we want to do is we want to try this out. So the way we try it out is this. We say if _name, double equals main, okay, so in other words, we're running the program directly, then we want to do something. So we'll say car list equals car, oh, look at that, I forgot to rename this, very bad. Okay, equals car list. That creates an empty car list. Okay, then let's put a couple of cars inside of it. Okay, so I'll go C1 equals car, and let's say that that's Toyota, Camry, 25,999.99, and let's make another car, C2 equals, oh boy, equals car, and let's say Honda Accord, and let's say 25,239.5.99. Okay, so I create a couple of cars, right? And then what I gotta do is I gotta add them into my car list. Okay, that's pretty easy. Just call the car list the add method. So car list dot add C1, car list dot add C2, and then I'm going to print car list dot toXML. And use a toXML function to print out the XML representation. Okay, so then that way I can check to see if it's working up until this point. Okay, so to do that, I go to my second ConEMU terminal. And I'm going to go Python 3 carlist.py. And then I get this. Okay, so I'm taking a look at it and trying to see if this is a correct XML representation of it, and it looks like it is. Okay, now, if you want it to be extra careful, right, you select this, you paste it into a file, you save it as something.xml, you view it in the browser has an XML parser, and it'll tell you if there's anything wrong with the format of the XML file. So that would be a way to make double sure that it's correct. Okay, now what you want to be able to do though is you want to also be able to create a toJSON method. And so I'm going to let you folks think about that as to how you might go and do that. You can work on it. Yeah, I'll let you work on it now. If you got anything else to catch up on, work on those things. But otherwise, work on coming up with a better, with a more complete car list class that has a toJSON method. What you can do, let me give you one more hint. If you go back to my pages for 111, okay, so www.hawaii.edu/tilde and my username, and just put ICS 111 instead of CENT280. It'll take you to this. And when you look at Java storage classes, it's either part 2 or part 3. Let me take a look at part 3. Yeah, this one. Okay, so if you go to part 3, then it shows you how in Java that you can write toJSON objects. Okay, so let me, oh no. Sorry, that's the wrong page. No, that's not the right one either. Let me see. I'm trying to remember where I actually put it there. Oh, yeah, here. Okay, so the JSON parsing using data binding, that one has an example of a Java class that has a toJSON method, okay, for a storage class that has an array list of another storage class. So you can use that. That's not the only way to solve it. The other way is basically you can create a dictionary and you can stick all your things in as a dictionary. Then from the dictionary you can create the JSON format. Okay, so if you recall from doing Python JSON parsing, when you use the load string method, you can basically read something in JSON format into a Python dictionary. The reverse is if you take a Python dictionary, instead of load string, you use dump string, so DUMPS, you can write the Python dictionary into a JSON string. Okay, so that's the other way to do it, or you could do it this way. Okay, so the JSON parsing using data binding has an example. It's in Java, but you gotta just try to convert it. Okay, so go ahead and work on that. Let me upload one more file. Not going to upload all of them, but let me upload. Okay, so here, I'm going to upload car.py. Oh, I'll upload carlist.py too. Okay. So that if you want to, you can use those to start. Okay, what you mainly have to do is work on the toJSON method. And there's a couple of different ways of doing that, and I'll let you go ahead and try to figure it out. If the first part we worked on today, you couldn't get your stuff to connect to the database with testconnect.php, then make sure you let me know, and then I can help you to make sure that works. Otherwise, just work on the toJSON part for the car list class.